Today is called Good Friday. I used to wonder why we call it good. What is Good Friday all about? After all, for Holy Week, this is the day that Jesus is beaten, spat upon, ridiculed, wrongly accused, crucified, and buried. It's the day that Jesus died. But then as I read through scriptures, I see why today is indeed good. You see, in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 25, the Bible says, "Therefore, he is always able to save those who come to God through him, since he always lives to intercede for them." The writer of Hebrews is imploring us to come to God. In some translations, the wording is draw near to God. He tells us to draw near to God with confidence that he will reward us with all that he is for us in Jesus. That is the essence of the gospel. Because of Jesus and Jesus alone, we can have a relationship, we can have fellowship, we can have all that God has designed for us, only because of Jesus and what he did on this day over 2,000 years ago. That is why it is called Good Friday. Jesus Christ came into the world for the sole purpose to make way for us to come to God without being consumed in our sin by his holiness. You see, that's what we deserve. That's what all of mankind deserves. Our sin separates us from a holy and a righteous God. But thanks be to God that he loves you. He loves me. He loves everyone so much that he made a way for us to be with him. And that way was the events that took place on this day. It had to be done. It is the only way. That is why it's called Good Friday. 1 Peter 3:18 says, "For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring you to God." The phrase righteous for the unrighteous. In Christian theology, this is called substitutionary atonement. Jesus became the substitute for my penalty, the penalty I deserved. He became the substitute for your penalty, for all of mankind's penalty. And we have atonement because of Jesus. He literally and willingly placed himself on that cross for me, for you, for anyone who would just believe. That is why it is called Good Friday. What happened on this day with Jesus is the darkest day in human history. In fact, the Bible tells us that God turned away from the cross because he could not see the amount of sin that was placed upon Jesus. At that moment, the entire earth became dark. Scholars tell us this was about 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and it was pitch black. There have been many dark days in history, and I know that during this pandemic, we are experiencing many dark days right now. Everything's in flux. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. We have questions that cannot be answered. Will we have our jobs when all of this ends? Will everyone I know and love be okay? These are valid questions. But I can't help but think that on this day, this first Good Friday, many of the same questions were being asked by those who had followed Jesus. Think about it. Jesus had died. He was gone. Hope seemed lost. Fear and anxiety engulfed his followers. His own apostles scattered in fear and hid for their lives. It seemed as if it was all over, but it wasn't. While it's very important that we pause and reflect on the gravity of this day, the weight of our sin, the penalty of our sin, let it also remind us that without this day, Sunday, the resurrection day, doesn't happen. Without this day, we have no hope. Without this day, we have no way of being with God and secure for eternity with him. Sunday is coming, but I'm thankful and I'm so grateful for this day, the reason why we call it Good Friday.